That's Stryker with the title track off of their new CD called Play to Win. Before that, Virgin Steel with Psychic Slaughter off of Seven Devils Moonlight. That's a 5 CD retrospective box set of lots of their work that's coming out. And before that, Baby Metal with their new CD called Starlight. I'm Ken the Metal Professor. This is Mostly Metal, and it's time on WVLP here for my little detour, just for a few minutes, out of heavy metal and into the world of horror. It is time for Ken's Dark Corner. This is Ken's Dark Corner, my weekly segment that I've been doing for 3 months now, where I give you some information, a little review, a little recap, a little discussion about the world of horror movies, because that's one of my indulgences other than heavy metal. And if I can't talk about it here, then I have no friends in the immediate vicinity that like this same kind of stuff. And so if I'm not talking about it here, I would be talking about it with strangers on the internet. And this is much more fun. My very first episode of Ken's Dark Corner that happened, 11 weeks ago now, because this is episode 12, was about the Bad Ben movies, and these are available on Amazon Prime. They are essentially homemade horror movies by a guy named Nigel Bach, who has turned his home into basically a movie studio. He has cameras all over his house, and he uses them to make stories about spooky goings-on in his house, sort of in a Paranormal Activity vein. The first 4 movies were called Bad Ben, and then Steelmanville Road, and then Badder Ben, and then Bad Ben, The Mandela Effect. That one came out in early 2018. And at the time, I thought that would be it. But no, there is now a 5th Bad Ben movie that just popped up on Amazon, I think maybe a week ago, 2 weeks at most, and it's called The Crescent Moon Clown. The original Bad Ben movies ranged from marginally passable because of the effort and just the obvious love that the guy had for what he was doing, to downright awful. I'll tell you where this one lands in that spectrum, or perhaps even carves out new territory in that spectrum. The movies are not good movies by any stretch of the imagination, but it's kind of like watching, your cousin comes to you and says, "Hey, look, I made this horror movie, check it out." And you appreciate the work that they did and what they were trying to do. And so you sit through it and, you recognize some good parts about it. And then you recognize all the reasons why there shouldn't be more of them. So this particular one doesn't directly follow the story of Nigel Bach's character as he was making things up in the original movies. He's not in it until the very, very end. By the way, there are spoilers here. So this movie starts off with new owners of the house on Steelmanville Road. This house is the center of some paranormal type goings on, and it's on a road called Steelmanville Road. One of the nice things that's come out of these movies is that the house itself is becoming one of the most important characters in the films. We get to know the geography of the house very, very well, and so that actually helps build some anticipation or spookiness when the characters hear noises or notice things going on or start exploring the house, which is really, really good. And it's on Steelmanville Road, which is actually a real road in New Jersey, apparently. This guy really lives in this house. But in the movie universe, the house has new owners because the people that were in the characters from the first movies have skedaddled and gotten the heck out of there. And the family that owns this house, the parents are away, and their daughter Renee is home from college, and so she gets into the house alone while she waits for her parents to come back sometime after the weekend or whatever. I don't really know. And while she's there, she explores the house and finds different things, including a little box up in the attic where she was hearing funny noises from. And she opens this box and a whole bunch of dust falls out, and also she pulls out a cross Now, if you open a box from an attic and the first thing you pull out is a cross, you probably should put it back, close the thing, and get out of there. But that's not what happens. That would make a movie very short. Under the cross is a clown toy doll, like a Raggedy Ann doll that's a clown. And she decides it's kind of spooky, and so she takes the box out onto the front porch and just kind of dumps it sideways, releases all the dust onto the porch in a pile, and then takes the doll around the house to a garbage can and throws it away. And you, as a veteran of movies like this, we all know that that was a bad move. And so from that point in the movie, she starts hearing spooky sounds in the house, and she's, exploring the house lots of ways. She starts discovering things like the word hello written on the kitchen floor and what appears to be blood, spooky footprints in a bathroom in what appears to be blood, but they're more like animal footprints, not people footprints. We start seeing a hooded figure in the background in some of the rooms. And remember, this movie is told through the viewpoint of security cameras and Renee's own cell phone. So you're always seeing kind of a top-down point of view from a high corner in the room. And in some cases, you're in a corner where you're watching Renee in one room, but you can also see down the hallway to another room, and lights in other rooms are going on by themselves. It's a little mysterious whether the lights are motion sensitive. Sometimes they are, because she'll walk into a room and they'll go on, but other times they don't go on until she presses a button, and that's a little inconsistent. Eventually we start noticing, there are things being moved around, and then we realize that there's actually another large figure roaming around the house, which is actually a life-size clown who's supposed to look scary, but it just looks like somebody went to his county fair to play the clown in some part of a performance at the county fair. It kind of takes away how cheapo this clown looks. Now, now, given that it's 9:01, I should take a breath and point out that you are listening to WVLP 103.1 FM in Valparaiso, Indiana. I'm Ken the Metal Professor. This is Ken's Dark Corner, and in just a couple of minutes, I'll return you to Mostly Metal. Every top and bottom of the hour, we are supposed to tell you all what you're listening to, the frequency, and the location. All that good stuff. That's what the FCC tells us to do, and it's a good idea anyway. So a lot of this movie is spent with Renee investigating noises, finding spooky things, getting spooked by spooky things and reacting to them, but also reacting to them in what really, really silly ways. In terms of her acting, she's the only person in this film up until the last couple of minutes, other than the spooky, shadowy figure and the clown guy who never actually speaks. He just cackles with evil clown laughter. In order to keep the audience engaged, there should be dialogue. And so Renee ends up doing a lot of kind of talking to herself narrative, but it's really awkward because people don't tend to talk to themselves the way she talks to herself to describe what's going on and describe her reaction to things. She does film some things on her cell phone, and we do get to see the point of view from the cell phone once in a while. So that's kind of weird. Just having one person try to carry this in that sort of way was unfortunate. Some of the quote-unquote action kind of goes on way too long for what it is. I mean, if you enjoy watching somebody mop a kitchen floor for about 10 minutes straight while lights are going on and off down the hallway in another part of the house, then this movie is definitely for you. Things really start to fall apart, I guess, about 2/3 of the way in the movie, where she hears funny noises from the attic over the second floor. It's one of these drop-down ladder types of attics. And so she's actually, she's kind of clever. She has a selfie stick, so she puts her cell phone on the selfie stick and lowers the door to the attic and raises the camera up and kind of, moves it around slowly in a circle through the opening. And now you're watching the point of view from this camera. And as she's turning it, there's a jump scare where the actual guy in the clown suit leaps out and grabs at the phone. And she freaks out and screams and runs away. Now, in most movies, this might be the place where the people finally try to get out of the house. At least make an attempt, even though you might not be successful. In this movie, her reaction to actually seeing a life-size person in a clown outfit hiding in her attic and who grabbed her camera, her reaction is to run down the hall into her bedroom and eventually fall asleep. which was ridiculous. So for a few minutes, we get to actually walk around with the clown. The clown now has the camera, and I don't know how a clown demon knows how to operate the video camera on a phone, but he does. And he is nice enough to hold it up and face it forward while he walks around the house and outside the house into the woods and back into the house and into the bedroom, where we discover Renee fast asleep. And it's, you know, it's always spooky in these movies. This is kind of an overused trope where you see through the person's own camera the person sleeping, and, you know, then later on sometimes they will find this footage and realize that they weren't alone. But she just discovered a life-size, real, actual clown in the attic of this house, and she went into the bedroom and was able to fall asleep. Yes, this is where the narrative necessities of the movie completely take over any sort of common sense. This movie also really stretches the whole boundary of, would you just get out of the house already? There are several scenes where Renee is running away from things that have frightened her, or even a spooky black arm who has grabbed her, and she's running away from it, and she actually runs right past the front door, up the stairs or down the stairs, never tries to open the front door to leave the house. She has called her friend earlier in the movie to ask if she could get a ride away from the house, but her friend is not able to do that, so her solution is just to stay in the house and never ever go outside the front door during a crisis. She does go outside a couple of times during times when there's not a crisis at the moment. But yeah, that was pretty awful. At the end of the movie, Nigel Bach shows up. He's the guy who makes these movies. His character was the center point of a couple of the previous movies. And if the movie hadn't gone totally off the rails by now, it certainly does at this point, because the entire tone of the movie changes when he shows up. Whether successfully or not, the first 95% of this movie is set up to be tense and to, you know, give you suspense and creeps about the noises and this mysterious clown guy who's sharing the property now with Renee. When Nigel Bach shows up, he decides it's time to turn the movie into a comedy. And so his character, you know, makes wisecracks and ha ha ha, isn't that funny? Renee's entire personality changes when he shows up. She changes from, you know, the shrieking girl who's running away from all the sounds and never actually leaving the house for good, into somebody who finally decides she's had enough because the clown does something to her. I won't say what. It's nothing gross, but it makes her mad, and so she turns around and slaps the clown and decides enough is enough at this point. Nigel Bach's character asks if Renee has found a book that was in the office of the house, which is a book that looks really, really old with yellowed pages and stuff. And yet in this book is a description of the clown doll and why it was put into this toy box into the attic in the first place, and then a description of how it would be possible to return the clown to the box. Now, how a book that looks really, really old would be able to describe events that have and are to happen in a house that looks like it was built in the early 2000s, we don't know. But yeah, so Nigel Bach shows up and the whole movie it was terrible already, and it got even more terribler during that last 5 minutes. And so I've appreciated what he was trying to do all along with this series, but he needs some friends to stage an intervention to make him stop, or at least to have somebody else come in and help do some of the screenwriting, because this was probably the worst movie I've seen this year. You might want to watch it anyway, just to see your own reaction, but I certainly can't recommend it by any means. And that is what I have to say about The Crescent Moon Clown, available on Amazon Prime. This is the end of Ken's Dark Corner. It's time to return to mostly metal. I've got heavy metal for the next 50 minutes in the hour. We have no Northwest Indiana Wrestling Action program this week, but we will return next week with news about the November 30th Acme Championship Wrestling show, which will happen down in Lake Village. You can search for information about that on Facebook. I'm going to play a couple of nice long songs here. One is by Redemption. It's the title track off of Long Night's Journey Into Day, their most recent CD. And then you'll hear a song called Savior and the Clockwork off of The Mystery of Time by Avantasia. I've put this disc into the second CD player in our stack, which sometimes doesn't like me. Let's hope it goes well.